Welcome to the Hard Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, I'm Fawn Germer.
And I'm Michelle Brigman.
And this is the Hard Won Wisdom Podcast. Today, we have been acting like total goofballs in your absence because we had a malfunction technologically. So then we started messing with Zoom and I gave myself better eyebrows. I hope y'all are watching on YouTube so you can see that Zoom did that. And then there was a while we both had mustaches and beards from Zoom. And now we are focused and in the zone, correct?
I want to play music like One is the Loneliest Number or something.
Or all by myself?
Yes.
Right? Okay. So that's what we're talking about, is being alone. And it may seem like a serious subject to many of you because people have said this to me again and again. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to date. They stay in really bad relationships because they don't want to be by themselves. I am someone who was paired up in my life mostly from the time I was 25 until about 4 years ago. Michelle?
Yes. I was taught that I needed to be with someone because I couldn't do it on my own. And I certainly practiced that. And in my recent past, I've been alone.
Yeah. Except you have kids there, so you're not.
Yeah, well, yes, I have my kids.
But yeah, I mean,
went through separation and have been living alone.
And I am here to report to you all, if you're afraid of being alone, it's awesome. It's epic. It's the best thing that ever happened in my life. I love it so much. And then guess what? I made it through it in COVID by myself.
I found a great quote though that I thought I would share.
What?
About this, because I think this might explain a lot in terms of particularly your pure sheer bliss, Fawn. So Wayne Dyer says, you can't be lonely if you like the person that you're alone with.
Well, that's what it comes down to. Okay, now, and I have to interrupt this important conversation. Sonny, everything's okay. I never let my dog sit in the room when I'm recording, but I figured since we're talking about being alone, and he's definitely the most significant part of the success of my being alone, I thought Sonny could stay in here and he's having a little bit of a bad dream. But it's the person you are alone with. And when COVID came and we had the lockdown, I started telling people, I think all you need is the right dog. I've got a dog and I have 2 cats. And I have never been happier in my life than to be able to create my days. I don't even like dating because I've gone out on a handful of dates, and every time I go, I realize that person is not competing with other people in the dating pool. They're competing with me. And if they're not more fun than I am by myself at home with the dog, I leave after an hour and 15 minutes. That's the cutoff point because I love being alone.
I love that you have that rule.
Isn't that awesome?
I know.
And when you're alone, you can decide if you're going to eat a baked potato or a box of Twinkies. Nobody knows. It's all on you. Now that can be bad or it can be good, but you're fully in control of the remote, right? My previous relationship, we had a lot of Real Housewives going on, and I didn't like that stuff. And a lot of Food Network, that's not my jam. But now 100% of what I watch is what I want to watch. I get to control that. And I realize I'm very successful at this because I have a lot of friends. And I have a lot of friends because, you know, as a speaker, I've traveled all over so much. So I have these little posses all over the country, and I'm real good about keeping in touch with people. So if you're hanging on because you don't want to be alone and you don't have a big friend network, let me tell you, it's not that hard to build that online. With social media, you can start to really expand your network and have people. And so I say that you need to have the right dog and cats, because I like those boys too. But also for me, a big element of the success of being alone are my AirPods, because I am somebody who loves to walk a lot. And every morning I take Sonny to this park. It's 2 blocks from my house and it has 4 miles of beautiful trails. And I take him and I usually call one of 3 people and I go hiking with these people every day. We're not saying anything, but none of us are with anybody. And it kind of is that touch point of us starting our days. And interesting that one of them is my ex, but I think you should always be close to your ex if it's at all possible. I mean, you wouldn't have been with the person if you didn't like them for some reason. You might just not want them forever. So, Michelle, I've just watched you deepen your soul over the last, how long has it been now? It's a year and a half?
Something like that, a year and a half or so. I think one of the things that I have found so interesting is I had no idea what I liked. And what I mean by that is, like, in my home and in my space, what do I like? Because my whole life has been compromising with someone else. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
even roommates. I mean, this doesn't even have to be like relationships. It can be roommates, but you're always compromising. And I mean, I'm in my 50s. I want to know, what the heck do I like? What colors do I like? And I realized that I was in no hurry to just do something because I felt like, I'm supposed to have my house decorated perfectly. I didn't even give a flip. I was like, I don't know. I want to just explore who I am. So learning what kind of activities I really enjoy. And like for me, talking about the social circle, I found that I was really interested in hiking, and I found there's this awesome hiking group near me. And so it helps to satisfy, right, that social interaction. I have dinner with friends that I wasn't connecting with. I am doing, wine chats online with some of my friends that live somewhere else. I mean, there's so many things that I'm not competing with another person's schedule or other people's schedule as much. And it has been a true luxury to just go on this journey, I guess I'd say, of self-discovery that has allowed me to do.
There's a lot in what you just said there. And the whole idea of how you found that hiking group is similar to something that I did years ago. I mean, I had this really bad year when both of my parents died very close together. And then, one of my closest friends wasn't a very good friend to me. It was just a really rough time. And I joined this group called the Slackers, simply laid back adventurers, campers, and kayakers. Now, if you know anything about me, you know that had my name written all over it, right? But this was a group on meetup.com. I hope you all know about Meetup. If you don't, it's not a dating site. It is a site where they have meetups. So a group for anything, whether it's camping and kayaking or eating sushi or book clubs or public speaking or business to business networking. And there's just everything on there. And for me, getting that kayaking group was such a gift because not a lot of my friends are willing to go camping with me all the time. And there's always something that the Slackers are doing. And I've gone with them to Costa Rica and to the Galapagos and to the Dry Tortugas. And, when you go to a meetup, the first thing people say to you is, "Hi, my name is." It's just assumed that there's going to be an introduction and that they need to make you feel welcome. So you're never going to be alone if you don't want to be. You don't have to be alone. You can stay busy as much as you want. But I have found that there are many, many, many hours where I like to just be home and not doing anything and not even watching TV, just kind of hanging out. And I have so much fun. so many times I do things and I just make myself laugh. And before we were getting ready for the podcast, and I was in my bedroom, and one of my cats, I don't know what freaked him out, but he shot across the room and under the bed like a real ding dong, right? And I'm like, huh? And I looked when I was like, what was that? I just looked at Sonny and I went like, huh? And Sonny's my dog, and it was like he looked at mommy like, huh? And it was just one of those moments where I laughed because I was having a reaction like that and communicating in that way to a dog. But oh, and then this is kind of important too, because notoriously I'm a terrible cook, and I've been told to never cook for other people. And when the lockdown happened, right before it happened, I had joined Weight Watchers, and I had been thinking about getting a Ninja Foodie. You know, it's kind of the ninja version of the Instant
I
Pot.
don't have one of those.
Well, I can guarantee you don't use it as much as I do. But I was staring at this thing in the box, and I'm like, you're never going to use it. And the lockdown's coming, and you know everything's going to change. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to get it. And I have used that thing, I think, every day that I have been home since. I cook everything in that thing. And I've suddenly gone from somebody who always eats out to somebody who can survive on my own feeding myself. Now, many of you think that's ridiculous because you're all good cooks, but for someone like me, that's a big deal. And so over these last few years, I've really created a completely different experience. And it's one that gives me confidence as I age. I mean, Michelle mentioned she's in her 50s. I'm in my 40s. Okay, not really. But I was once in my 40s. But as you're getting older, the only negative on this, and it's significant, is that fear that medically something will happen and nobody is going to know. Because, you know, my mom was a stroke patient, and with strokes, it's so critical that it's discovered immediately. And my dog is not going to call 911 for me. And so that is something I think about. But then I think there are a lot of people who are married and then their spouse dies and they're still alone. And, you know, I guess I'll just get one of those I've fallen and can't get up buttons and push it when the time comes. And if I'm supposed to have a bad experience and die, okay. I mean, really, I have had such a good time in this life. So for the people who are listening, and we're going to obviously continue, it's just don't be afraid to be alone, because you may surprise yourself and find out that it is so much better than settling for something that's not working.
Well, and I was going to add to that to say that how many people are alone, and well, how many people are lonely yet not alone, because they may be sharing a home and space with their, whether it's their spouse or their kids, but there's zero interaction. I mean, let me just say, raising a dang teenager, because they don't want to be around you. They're off in the other room. They avoid you at all at all costs, or at least we're in that phase. So it's just interesting that you hang on to something whenever you could have a much more fulfilling relationship on your terms with yourself and with others, where you feel completely embraced and surrounded by wonderful people that help make your life better. Again, on your terms. It's also been funny to me, though. Let me be clear. Whenever I was out on my own, okay, and I had to change the water filter in my refrigerator, and it caused me to have a freaking crying fit, because I was like, I've never had to do this before. Am I doing it right? And of course, 2 days later, I found out I didn't do it right, because there was water everywhere on the drawer in my fridge and on the, but it was like a 3-second thing to solve. And then the fact that when I did it, or when I do these little projects, I'm so proud of myself.
Right? It's like I did
so
it with a YouTube video.
This.
Well,
yes.
It's like I have two options: do a YouTube or call my neighbor who's really
yeah.
nice.
I mean, and it's funny. I was going to say, there's always somebody to call. Let me be clear.
Yeah.
Free or paid, it doesn't matter. But just try it on your own, and you'd be surprised what you can do.
people. I mean, I got to tell you that my success being alone is largely attributed to a guy named Scotty Truesdale, which Michelle, I've told you about him before.
No,
He's
I've
like,
met him.
did you? Oh, that's right. You came and
Yes.
visited after one of my near disasters that he saved me from.
Yes.
So Scotty is my AC guy, and he is the best human being. He is the best human being. I just can't say it. I always tell him he's my father's best friend because my dad always worried that if I didn't have a man, I wasn't going to be okay. And Scotty he's got this radar and he knows when something has gone wrong in my house. And then I look and he pulls into my driveway. I'm not lying. This has happened so many times, not once, not twice, at least 10, 15 times. Like, one time, I was moving my desk from my old office into this office. And I don't know what the problem was. It got in there somehow, right? But it got wedged. And I mean, there was no moving it. It was stuck in the door. And I'm trying to climb over it to get out of there. And it's just, and I'm just in tears. And then that truck pulls in the driveway. I was like, Scotty, right? So you gotta have a Scotty.
Yes.
Or I hope you have a Scotty, because boy, he makes my life so much better. And I wanted to tell you this one thing. So I went on this bike trip years ago, and I'm not maligning anybody I've ever been with because, except for a couple of relationships, everybody has been first rate. But I was on this bike trip and this woman asked me if I was in a relationship and I said yes. And I started describing it and she goes, well, do you miss her? Yeah, people, it was with a woman. Do you miss her? And I'm like, yeah. And she from the sound of my voice, she goes, do you miss her or do you miss somebody? And that, I never forgot that because I think a lot of us put somebody in our life.
That's a powerful question.
Isn't that?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so lucky that somebody is somebody really meaningful and important to me still. And I don't regret the relationship. I just wish I had known sooner how much happier I was going to be by myself. And God, I am just not in a hurry to settle down anymore. I think I want somebody.
Live full.
Well, I do live full. I do. I've never minded going alone, hiking or kayaking. I'll do anything. And especially like camping, that was a big awakening. Of course, when you take a black pit bull with you, you're in pretty good hands. But I hope that if any of you are teetering, you stay because you love somebody and believe in the relationship, not because you aren't sure about yourself and don't feel strong enough to dare to go it alone. Because I promise you, you can always find another crappy relationship.
Yeah. And if you do choose to be alone, take the time to like discover yourself. Don't be in a rush. Take the time. It is like one of the most fantastic gifts you can give yourself.
Yeah. It
Appreciate
is.
it.
I noticed after a while that sometimes I would go out with my friends for happy hour or dinner, and at about 90 minutes, I was done. And that was a big change because I never was in a hurry to leave anything. And then I've come to realize I really like that quiet time. And I know that I'm a bit of an introvert, and people think, no, you're outgoing. You can't be an introvert. And that has nothing to do with it. I recharge by myself. And so that, I think being a little introverted doesn't hurt if you're going to be alone. But like Michelle said, there are lots of ways to fill your life with people.
So I think you gave some good tips, right? You talked about meetup.
Yeah.
There's great things on even Facebook to see events that are happening in your area. Even the hiking group I mentioned, it's only been around a little over a year. And in the DFW area, there's over on any given hike, organized hike, there's nearly 100 women that show up.
Wow.
And all she did was do a call to say, I like to hike. Anybody want to join me? And just over a year later, consistently 100 people
Well,
show up.
who wants to go hiking with 100 people though?
Well, you get broken up into groups based on kind of pace and speed, so it works out. But and the purpose of it is really more community empowerment and fellowship with other women. It's not. I mean, there's other groups that are around that if you want to do like a hardcore, trail run or something like that, it just kind of depends. But for its purpose, it's about community, and that's just one example. There's a million of those. Your yoga studio, your classes at the gym, the book clubs that you mentioned. And so don't be afraid if you're interested in something, just check it out because maybe you never had time to go and figure out what cool hobbies you might like. You don't know what you don't know until you try it. And there's like, what do you have to lose? Nothing.
Right.
Nothing.
And you said about, virtually connecting with people. And that is powerful too. You and I do this all the time. We don't just do this for the podcast. We might pretend we're talking about the podcast, but we're not. We're just goofing off. And it's amazing how you can have best friends that you're never sitting next to because of technology. So I never feel it. I thought I might, and I never do.
Because you're pretty good company.
And well, thank you. But what's also interesting to me is that Julie, my ex, loves it just as well. Mm. And, we'll get to a point where we're hanging out and it's like, go home. Yeah. Bye. Right. And we really like and honor that space. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is enough to sustain me for a long time. I look forward to seeing how that develops. But I do think that when I get to that point where I want to do the RV thing full time, there needs to be somebody. So if y'all let me know your ideas.
If anybody wants to do RV with you. So I was going to say one more thing for the people, this isn't all about just the relationships you're in. If you're in a great relationship, don't neglect that self-care and self-love to spend time with yourself. So create a space in your home. Maybe there's a bedroom where the kids moved out. Maybe there's a place in the, it's out in the garden and spending time there. But find a place, walking in the evenings. I mean, I don't know, but find a place where you can spend alone time with yourself because your soul needs it.
That's so important. And I wrote about somebody who did that for herself in her house. And then as soon as she made that space for herself, her kids descended it. But it's this part of the house nobody ever used. And suddenly everybody had to be there because mom was there. And then I have another friend and she just wants some space from her husband. He's fine. He's a nice guy. She wants some space. Mm-hmm. And if she says, I'm going out with a friend, that's when he chooses to leave the house. She goes, I just want some time in my house alone. And I laugh at this. When I was married, I went shopping with my husband one time and I said, okay, let's meet up in an hour. And after 10 minutes, I looked and he's about 20 feet away from me, just watching me. And I'm like, go away. And so he leaves. And then 5 minutes later, I see him and he's watching me. He's just kind of waiting for that hour to go. And I'm like, come on. So you can be in a great relationship. And that was, that's the other thing. I talk about these exes. Those relationships never end because you don't love the person. If it were all about love, it would be easy, wouldn't it, Michelle? Mm-hmm. But you can be in a great relationship and still need space for yourself. And so you have to find a way to create those boundaries. It's not a crime to want some space. You have permission to do that. You don't need permission.
And enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So
Well,
everybody will be interested to hear what you're doing to
yes.
create space and alone time for yourself and how the struggles and the wins through the process. So you'll have to reach out and let us know.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Just message us at info@hardwonwisdom.com. I'd love to hear your stories. So, with that, you all have a nice time. Try to create some space for yourself this week. Don't be afraid to be alone. And see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for joining the Hard Won Wisdom podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.